My mother-in-law poured scalding coffee on my lap when I said no to moving in with her. My name is Briella. Today, I'm going to tell you my story. But before I continue, please like, share, and subscribe to hear more stories like this. I married Cameron Whitmore 3 years ago. He's a gentle soul, a high school English teacher who loves poetry and long walks. We met at a bookstore in Portland, bonded over our shared love of classic literature, and built a quiet, happy life together in our small but cozy bungalow on Maple Street. His mother, Constance Whitmore, was a force of nature from day one. She's 63, a widow for the past 5 years, and someone who believes the world revolves around her needs and opinions. She lives in a massive Queen and Victorian that's been in the Whitmore family for generations, 7 bedrooms, wraparound porch, and enough space to house a small army. She lives there alone and hates every minute of it. From the moment Cameron and I got engaged, Constance made it clear she expected us to move in with her. The house is far too big for one person, she'd say at every family dinner. It only makes sense for you two to live there. Think of all the money you'd save. We always politely declined. Cameron and I valued our independence and privacy. We'd worked hard to afford our little bungalow, and it was ours, a sanctuary where we could be ourselves without judgment or interference. Constance didn't take rejection well. She'd show up unannounced at our house, criticizing everything from our furniture choices to our grocery selections. She had keys that Cameron had given her years ago, and she used them freely, letting herself in whenever she pleased. You really should paint these walls something warmer, she'd announce, walking through our living room uninvited. And this sofa is atrocious. I have a much better one in storage. I asked Cameron repeatedly to get the keys back. It's my mother, Briella. She means well. She's just lonely. She's intrusive. This is our home. She raised me in that big house all alone after Dad died. Can't we be a little patient with her? His guilt always won. Constance knew exactly how to manipulate him, reminding him of his father's death, her loneliness, how much she'd sacrificed raising him as a single mother. Never mind that she had a substantial life insurance payout, a trust fund, and enough money to travel the world if she wanted. She preferred to stay in that giant house and make everyone around her miserable. Things escalated 6 months ago when Cameron's sister Autumn moved across the country for a job opportunity in Denver. Constance had been dividing her controlling attention between both children, but now Autumn was in Colorado and rarely visited. That left Cameron as her sole focus. The demands became more frequent and more aggressive. She started calling multiple times a day, inventing emergencies that required Cameron to rush over. A leaking faucet that turned out to be fine. A suspicious noise in the attic that was just the house settling. Chest pains that disappeared the moment he arrived. She's manipulating you, I told him after the 3rd false emergency in 2 weeks. What if something is really wrong and I ignore it? I'd never forgive myself. Constance overheard that conversation. She'd let herself in again, claiming she needed to borrow our stepladder. She smiled sweetly at me. Cameron understands family loyalty, even if you don't. I bit my tongue, but barely. This woman was systematically destroying our peace, and my husband was too guilt-ridden to stop her. Then Constance started having accidents whenever we visited. She'd trip on stairs and need Cameron to catch her. She'd forget to eat and be too weak to cook for herself. She'd leave the stove on and create actual fire hazards. Each incident came with the same refrain. I'm getting older. I really shouldn't be living alone. If only I had family nearby. Cameron started talking about moving in with her. Just temporarily, Briella. Just until she's more stable. She's not unstable. She's manipulative. The moment we move in, temporary will become permanent. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Your mother has been engineering this from the beginning. We fought about it constantly. Constance sensed the tension and turned up the pressure. She started showing up at Cameron's school, embarrassing him in front of colleagues with her theatrical displays of frailty. She'd call me at work, sobbing about how lonely she was, how much she missed her son. I started avoiding her calls. That was apparently the wrong move. 3 weeks ago, Constance invited us to Sunday brunch at her house. Cameron insisted we go. It's just brunch, Briella. A few hours won't kill you. We arrived at 11. Constance had prepared an elaborate spread, fresh croissants, fruit salad, eggs Benedict, and her special dark roast coffee that she imported from some exclusive supplier in Seattle. She was playing the gracious hostess, asking about our week, complimenting my dress. I should have known something was wrong. Constance was never this pleasant without an agenda. After we'd eaten, she led us to her sitting room. Family photos covered every surface, mostly of Cameron at various ages, a few of Autumn, and a prominent portrait of her late husband. She sat in her high-back chair that looked almost throne-like, and folded her hands. Briella, I've made my decision. You and Cameron will move into my house next month. We're not moving in with you, Constance. We've talked about this. Don't be ungrateful. I'm offering you a beautiful home and you're refusing. After everything I've done. We have our own home. We're staying there. You selfish little. She grabbed the coffee pot from the table, the one with the fresh, scalding coffee she just poured. And before I could process what was happening, she dumped the entire thing directly onto my lap. The pain was immediate and excruciating. I screamed, jumping up, coffee soaking through my dress into my skin. Cameron was on his feet shouting. Constance sat there with the empty coffee pot in her hands, her face a mask of cold fury. That's what happens when you disrespect me in my own house. Cameron grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the kitchen. My thighs and lower stomach were burning. He turned on the cold water, trying to help, but I was shaking so badly I could barely stand. Through the doorway, I could see Constance calmly setting down the coffee pot and smoothing her skirt. We need to get you to the hospital, Cameron said, his voice breaking. Your mother just assaulted me. I know. I'm so sorry. Let's just get you help first. We went to the emergency room at Providence Medical Center. Second-degree burns across my thighs and lower abdomen. The doctor who examined me, Dr. Ramona Santiago, was furious when she heard what happened. Someone deliberately poured hot coffee on you? My mother-in-law, because I refused to move into her house. She stopped what she was doing and looked at me directly. That's assault. You need to file a police report. Cameron, who'd been standing quietly in the corner, spoke up. Maybe we should just handle this as a family. Your mother just gave your wife second-degree burns. Dr. Santiago interrupted sharply. This isn't a family matter. This is a crime. I filed the report from my hospital bed. 2 officers came to take my statement, Officers Keith Donovan and Ana Morales. They photographed my injuries, took detailed notes, and asked if this was the first time Constance had been violent. Not physically violent, I admitted, but she's been increasingly controlling and manipulative for months. They went to Constance's house that evening. According to their report, she claimed I'd been clumsy and spilled coffee on myself, that I was trying to frame her because I didn't like her. She actually cried and told them I'd been trying to alienate her from her son. But the evidence didn't support her story. The coffee pot had been on a stable table. There were no spills anywhere except where I'd been sitting. Multiple witnesses, Cameron, confirmed she'd deliberately thrown it. They arrested her for assault and battery. Cameron was devastated. She's my mother, Briella. I can't believe she'd do this. I can. She's been escalating for months. This was just the next step in her campaign to control our lives. Constance was released on bail the next day. She immediately started a smear campaign, calling every family member, friend, and neighbor she could think of. I was clumsy. I was vindictive. I was trying to destroy her relationship with her son. Cameron's aunt, Florence, called, screaming at him for letting me frame his poor mother. But some people saw through it. Autumn called from Denver, horrified. Mom did what? Cameron, you can't seriously be defending her. I'm not defending her. She's our mother. She assaulted your wife. There's no excuse for that. Autumn flew in for the trial. So did Constance's sister, Rosalind, who'd apparently had her own issues with Constance's controlling behavior over the years. The family split predictably, older relatives who'd always enabled Constance versus younger ones who'd experienced her manipulation firsthand. The trial happened 2 months after the incident. My burns had healed into pink scars that the doctors said would fade over time, but might never completely disappear. I had to wear loose clothing for weeks, couldn't work properly, and spent nights crying from the pain. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Catherine Bradford, took the case seriously. We see a lot of domestic violence, but adult children and their spouses are particularly vulnerable because of family pressure to drop charges. I'm glad you're standing firm. Constance showed up to court dressed in mourning clothes, black dress, black veil, the whole theatrical performance. Her lawyer, Sterling Hammond, tried to paint her as a fragile, elderly widow who'd had a moment of emotional instability. Mrs. Whitmore had just been told once again that her only local family member was refusing to help her in her time of need. She was distraught. The coffee pot slipping was an accident born of emotional distress. But Catherine destroyed that narrative. She presented photos of my burns, graphic, undeniable evidence of the severity. She had Cameron's testimony about his mother's months of manipulation and escalating behavior. She brought in Dr. Santiago, who testified that the burn pattern was consistent with coffee being poured, not spilled. Then she played her trump card. Constance's neighbor, an elderly man named Walter Green, had been gardening next door and heard the entire confrontation through the open windows. He testified about hearing Constance's ultimatum, my refusal, the scream, and then Constance's calm statement, "That's what happens when you disrespect me in my own house." Constance's face went white. She hadn't known anyone could hear. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty of assault and battery. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in jail, 3 years probation, mandatory anger management classes, and a permanent restraining order preventing her from coming within 500 feet of me. The courtroom erupted. Constance screamed that this was a travesty, that I'd poisoned her son against her, that she was being persecuted. Aunt Florence sobbed. Rosalind looked satisfied. Autumn squeezed my hand. Cameron just sat there staring at his mother as the bailiffs led her away. The aftermath was complicated. Cameron went through a deep depression, wrestling with guilt, anger, and grief. He started therapy, finally confronting the years of manipulation he'd endured. His therapist, Dr. Harrison Cole, helped him understand that his mother's behavior had been abusive long before the coffee incident. It had just been psychological rather than physical. She conditioned you to prioritize her needs over your own, to feel guilty for having boundaries, to believe her well-being was your responsibility, Dr. Cole explained in one of our joint sessions. The assault on Briella was an escalation, but the pattern was always there. Constance served 14 months before being released on good behavior. She emerged from prison bitter and vengeful. She wrote letters to anyone who'd read them, painting herself as a victim of an ungrateful daughter-in-law and a brainwashed son. Most people ignored her. A few enablers, like Aunt Florence, welcomed her back and reinforced her victim narrative. She couldn't return to her Victorian house. Legal fees and fines had drained her resources, and she'd mortgaged the property to pay for her defense. The bank foreclosed while she was in prison. The house was sold to a young family who, according to Autumn, who stayed in touch with old neighbors, painted it cheerful colors and filled it with children's laughter. Everything Constance had claimed she wanted, but had been too controlling to ever actually achieve. Constance moved into a small apartment across town. She works part-time at Powell's Books, ironically the same chain where Cameron and I met. We've heard she tells customers about her ungrateful son who abandoned her, though the details change depending on her audience. The restraining order remains in effect. She's not allowed to contact me, and Cameron has chosen not to have contact with her either. That was his decision, one he made after months of therapy. "She nearly killed you," he said one night, his voice hollow. "Over a power struggle. Over control. I keep thinking, what if she'd done something worse? What if I'd kept making excuses for her? But you didn't. When it mattered, you stood by me. I should have stood by you sooner. I should have seen what she was doing." He carries guilt, though he's learning to manage it. We both bear scars, mine physical, his emotional. But we're rebuilding, stronger and with better boundaries than before. Autumn visits regularly now that she doesn't have to navigate Constance's demands. She apologized to me during one visit for not intervening sooner. "I escaped to Denver partially to get away from Mom. I should have warned you how bad it could get. Would I have believed you if you had?" She considered this. Probably not. Nobody wants to think their partner's parent is capable of that level of violence. The extended family has mostly settled into camps. Aunt Florence and a handful of older relatives maintain that Constance was provoked and I'm somehow at fault. The majority, especially Cameron's generation and younger, have cut Constance off entirely, many sharing their own stories of her manipulation and control once they felt safe doing so. Rosalind told me at a family gathering that Constance had always been like this. She drove away every friend she ever had. Your husband's father died young, but honestly, I think the stress of living with her contributed. She can't stand anyone having independence from her. My scars have faded to faint marks that are barely visible now. The emotional damage took longer to heal. I had nightmares for months, of hot liquid, of sudden violence, of being helpless. Therapy helped, as did time, and Cameron's unwavering support once he'd broken free from his mother's psychological hold. We still live in our little bungalow. We changed all the locks, installed a security system, and created the peaceful sanctuary we'd always wanted. Sometimes I think about Constance alone in her tiny apartment, working a minimum wage job, having lost everything she'd claimed to care about. People ask if I feel guilty. The answer is no. She made her choice when she decided that physical violence was an acceptable response to someone setting a boundary. She prioritized control over relationship, dominance over love, and power over family. Last week, a letter arrived, forwarded from the courthouse. Constance had sent it to our old address. Cameron held it for a long time before handing it to me. Do you want to read it? I opened it. 3 pages of her handwriting, single-spaced. I scanned the first paragraph. More self-pity, more blaming me for her situation, more insistence that she'd been driven to desperate action by my selfishness. I didn't read further. I put it in the shredder and watched the pages turn to confetti. What did it say? Cameron asked. The same thing she always says, that she's the victim and everyone else is wrong. He nodded. We both understood that some people never learn, never change, never accept responsibility for their actions. Constance would go to her grave believing she'd been wronged, that her assault was somehow justified, that she was entitled to control her son's life regardless of the cost. But she doesn't control anything anymore. She has no power over us, no access to our lives, no ability to manipulate or harm. She lives with the consequences of her choices, and those consequences are permanent. If someone who was supposed to love you responded to a simple boundary with deliberate violence and then spent years claiming they were the real victim, would their loneliness or regret matter? Or would the scars they left be enough to justify cutting them out forever? The truth is, I know my answer. And I'm finally at peace with it. Some doors, once closed, should stay locked forever.